name is Nadia and this is Pika, and this is our first ever YouTube video. And the reason we're doing this is because we get a lot of questions from our Instagram friends about what is it like to fly with a dog and what is it like to travel with a dog to a different country. Pika has been on over 30 flights to different continents, to several different countries and islands, and we wanted to share our experience and tips to hopefully give you more information so you can also make an informed decision about whether or not you want to travel with your dog as well. So we will first start with answering all of your questions on Instagram. I'll go through each and every one of them. And then afterwards we will give you 9 main tips on how to successfully and happily fly with your dog to a foreign country. Let's go! Okay, so Eve Marlene 6 is asking whether to fly direct 12 hours or have a layover. This is an excellent question that we get a lot, and it comes down to absolute personal preference and to the preference of your dog. For us personally, and for me personally, it is much easier and better to have fewer shorter flights. Although that means that the entire duration of the journey is much longer, sometimes, even 6, 7, 8 hours longer. But for me, for my peace of mind, knowing that Pika won't have to hold her pee in for 16, 17 hours is definitely worth it. So what I try to do is, if I fly, let's say, from the United States to Europe with Pika, we would try to stop over. If we fly from Los Angeles, we might go to Chicago first or to New York first, and then I always make sure that the layover is long enough for me to be able to take Pika out of the airport, go potty, so Pika can go potty, and then go on our second journey. But if you Google this answer, because I Googled this answer before we started traveling with Pika, if you Google this answer, a lot of people will tell you that they prefer longer flights because the entire journey is shorter. And certainly if you have a senior dog, for example, this longer flight might be a better option for you. So it just really comes down to personal preference at the end. I'm a superhero. Hero, I love you. How are you able to travel to Europe without being quarantined? Again, great question. There are no European countries, I'm not sure about Iceland, but no other European countries that, as far as I know, require quarantine. Even the United Kingdom, which is pretty strict as it's an island, does not require quarantine. Usually, and this is certainly true for all European Union countries, what you do require is all the medical records and a special medical certificate from your USDA accredited veterinarian that shows your dog's rabies tests, your dog's microchip, certain other tests depending on the country. But your dog, if you follow all these rules, does not have to be quarantined. So I'm not sure what specific countries you're referring to, but yes, in general, they don't have to be quarantined. Little Ginge. This is not a serious question, Ginger. Does everyone on the plane want to give you belly rubs? I would. Of course they do. Just joking. But it's this, in all seriousness, certain airlines and certain flight attendants are super friendly and they are very loving and love dogs, and some aren't. So it's just a matter of luck. Addy Bunny 07. Is it easy to take dogs on planes? If it's a small dog, it's much easier. If it's a large dog, much more difficult. Evie the Cav. Can you fly to Australia with your dog? Evie, that's an excellent question, and one that I've been researching a lot because I have a lot of Cavalier friends in Australia that I would love to visit. Unfortunately, Australia is one of those countries that is very, very, very hard to fly into with a dog. There's a lot of different rules and requirements, starting with dogs are only allowed to fly into Melbourne. So wherever you do, you can only fly into Melbourne. Number 2, a very difficult one, dogs are not allowed to fly in cabin in Australia, which means that you will have to fly them in cargo. I will strongly discourage anyone to put their dog in cargo unless you really, really have to. If you're moving to a new country and you're moving everything, then you don't have a choice. But if you do have a choice, I would not recommend flying your dogs in cargo. Number 3 for Australia, regardless of all the titer tests that you do, all the blood work you can do on your dog, Australia does require quarantine, and that's at least 10 days, which means that when you fly into Melbourne with your dog in cargo, they will still have to go through quarantine. And last, apparently, and my Australian friends will confirm that, I just saw a spider on the wall. Okay, my Australian friends will confirm that, that dogs are not allowed on internal flights within Australia. So Australia is unfortunately a very tough one, Evie. Next question, Alenka Mojic. How much do you pay for tickets? Great question. Depends on the airline, but I would say, rule of thumb, anywhere between $120 to $200 per pet per flight. Again, depends on the airline, but that's kind of the average. And I think it's similar in euros, around 100 euros to 150 euros per flight. Vita Erika. Your favorite airlines and some best travel hacks. Great questions. I will go through our 9 main tips for dog-friendly travel later on. So those are kind of going to be our travel hacks. But our favorite airlines. For internal flights within the United States, we love United. They have always been really friendly with us. But I will say that because they recently changed their rules for intercontinental travel with pets, we no longer call them our favorite airline. We really love Lufthansa, we love Austrian, and we have had really good experience with Swiss as well. So I would say those 3 were our favorite ones so far. But I will also say that Pika is an emotional support animal, which makes a little bit of a difference, so she's allowed to be in my lap. And if you want to know more about traveling with emotional support animals, there's going to be a link in bio, in the description, to another video that Herky the Cavalier did actually with us, and it's all about traveling with emotional support animals. My 4 Cavaliers, how do you apply for the paperwork for air travel to sit with you in the cabin? So thank you, my 4 Cavaliers. Are you going to fly with 4 Cavaliers? That would be amazing. 4 Cavaliers on one plane, oh my god. So if you're referring to being able to hold a dog in your lap during travel, during air travel, that is only possible if your dog is either a service animal or an emotional support animal. There is no specific paperwork you file for that. If your dog classifies as an emotional support animal, that is determined by your doctor or your therapist. So again, if you want to know more about emotional support animals, you can go on the other video that we did recently with Herky the Cavalier. But if your dog is not an emotional support or a service animal, they will have to be in the carrier under the seat in front of you. Bartok the Cavalier. Bartok has an amazing name, and I love it. Any good travel bag recommendations? Yes, Bartok. We have a recommendation for our travel bag, the travel bag that we use, and that has been with us since the very first flight that Pika took when she was 8 weeks old. We picked her up from Sacramento and we flew down with her to Los Angeles in a SleepyPod Air. It's a travel bag that we cannot say enough great things about. We love it. There's no sponsorship or anything, we just really love this bag. It has an extremely soft bottom that's removable and washable. It's made out of a material that's soundproof, so your dogs feel really comfortable in it. It's extremely durable. It's very easy to travel with. It kind of attaches onto the handle of a suitcase. So yes, 10 million points for a SleepyPod Air. And I can put a link in the description to where you can find it as well. Maui the King Cavalier. What documents are needed to travel to Europe, EU and Great Britain if Brexit ever happens, leaving at the end of September? Okay, I can't go into too many details about all the documents you need because it's pretty extensive. But if you are based in the United States, there's a great website, I'm going to put the link in the description, called APHIS, A-P-H-I-S, that lists all the requirements for every single country you want to take your dog to, step by step, So if you're flying from the United States, this is a US government website that lists all the requirements. It gives you all the documentation, so you can literally print it out, take it to your veterinarian, and they fill it out. But in short, to travel to European Union or Great Britain, you will have to find a USDA accredited vet. Not all veterinarians are USDA accredited, so be careful of that if you're based in the US again. So you'll have to find a good veterinarian that will have to fill out, I think it's about 6 or 7 pages of the veterinary report. It's pretty straightforward. All you need is your dog to have been vaccinated against rabies, and your dog also needs a microchip. And for the EU, the microchip has to be 15 digits. So be mindful, some dogs are microchipped, but the microchip is only 9 digits. That is not valid for the EU. So make sure that your dog has a microchip implanted that is 15 digits. So those are the 2 main requirements. And then for the United Kingdom, Great Britain, there's another one, and that is tapeworm medication or tapeworm preventative. And be careful, because from what I know, the United Kingdom does not allow pets in cabin. So what I would recommend is for you to maybe find a flight to Paris or Brussels or Amsterdam, and then you can take a boat or a train to the UK. So if you have all the necessary medical documentation, you should be totally fine. The next question: what is your feeding schedule like for travel? Ben Solo the Cavalier. Thank you, Ben Solo. That's a really great question, and that's something that we've been experimenting with a lot during all of our travels, and this is specifically relevant for long flights. So for us, any flight that is shorter than 5 or 6 hours is not considered a long flight, because really I feel like every dog should be able to hold, their potty for a few hours. So if the flight is shorter than 5 hours or 5 or 6 hours, we don't really change Pika's feeding schedule. But if it's a long flight, an intercontinental flight or more, or several subsequent flights, we actually skip Pika's meal before the flight. So if a flight is early in the morning, we would maybe feed her a very, very early dinner. She usually gets food at around 6 or 7 in the evening and early morning. So if we fly early morning, we would only feed her the day before at maybe 4 p.m. and then only give her maybe a little treat afterwards. But if we fly in the afternoon, we would not feed her a real breakfast. So I might give her a little snack, or I might wake up really early at 5 or 6, give her some food, and then take her for a long walk. So definitely before a long flight, I will skip a meal. And then I'll have treats and a little chew with me on a long flight, because of course she gets really, really hungry. So when we get food on the flight, I would usually give her a little chew to chew on, and little treats. Peyton the Cavalier. Anywhere that you brought Pika that you wouldn't recommend, and do you find the airlines are fussy about the carrier size? Thank you, Peyton, great questions. Depends on the airline. Our carrier is obviously approved for airline travel. It's called SleepyPod Air. There's a few other carrier brands like Sherpa and a few others that do specific carriers for airlines, and I think airlines are usually familiar with those. I've never seen anyone measure our carrier, but having said that, I have heard of stories of friends of mine who have like very fancy dog carriers, like a Louis Vuitton dog carrier, that some airlines have been fussy about because apparently they don't fit in the specific, they don't fit in the measurements that airlines require. So I would recommend you buy an airline approved carrier just to be on the safe side. And anywhere you brought Pika that you wouldn't recommend? We've never flown anywhere that we didn't like with Pika, because we usually do a lot of research on the destination, or we just fly to our home in Europe. But I will say we recently visited the desert in California with her. It was by car, but still it was beautiful, but very difficult for Pika. She got little thorns in her paws, she got a tick. So desert, I would maybe not recommend. It's beautiful for photos, a beautiful landscape, but not for a delicate little angel like Pika. Okay, we want to now give you 9 of our main tips and tricks for how to happily and successfully travel and fly with your dog to a foreign destination. So, tip number 1, do research in advance. We strongly encourage you to start researching your destination country 3 to 4 months in advance. Research their rules and regulations for importing animals into that country. Research and reach out to them, reach out to your own government. If you're in the US, that might be USDA. If you're not, it's your other, your relevant agency at your own government, to make sure that you know exactly what the rules are, because sometimes there's tests required that take months to undertake. So do research in advance on your destination country. Tip number 2, find a veterinarian, if possible, that is who is experienced in traveling with dogs. So find a veterinarian that has filled out the travel certificates in the past and that knows what countries require what documents and what vaccinations. Of course, it's possible to find that out yourself and to print all these documents out yourself and then just have your vet sign it and fill it out, but it just makes it much easier if your veterinarian knows what they're doing and has done it before. Also be careful, because if you're leaving the US for a foreign country, you will not only need a vet certificate, so a veterinarian certificate, but you will also have to take that certificate to a USDA local office within 10 days before travel to have it stamped. So there's several layers and several rules and steps to traveling with your dog in terms of what paperwork you need. Tip number 3, do your research on your airline. Not all airlines allow dogs and pets in cabin. Certain airlines have certain rules for certain countries. Different airlines will have a limitation on your dog's weight and size, and some of them may only allow, let's say, 1 dog in cabin. So do research on your airline in advance, and as soon as you decide on where you're going to travel and what airline you're going to take, reach out to this airline and see if it's even possible to fly on the day that you wanted to fly, because maybe there's already another dog on the plane, or maybe they don't allow pets in cabin for that specific flight. So do research on your airline as well. Tip number 4 would be to buy a high-quality dog carrier and make your dog used to it. We often see people reaching out asking about what dog travel carriers we recommend because they're flying the next day. I would recommend you research the carrier and buy it several weeks in advance. Put it on the floor at home and get your dog used to it. The worst thing you can do is buy this carrier 1 or 2 days before you fly, and then your dog will not only be stressed because he's going to be in a plane, they're also going to be stressed because they're in this new carrier that they have never seen before. So make sure your dog gets used to the carrier, make sure the dog has slept in it, has snuggled in it, so it smells like him or her, so when the time comes that you actually have to fly, they're happy about being in this carrier. Like I said, we recommend SleepyPod Air, but there's several other brands that have good carriers that are airline approved. Tip number 5, tire your dog out before travel. So if we travel early in the morning, I would take Pika out on a long walk or usually a hike the night before, and sometimes I would even wake up in the middle of the night and take her for a walk in the middle of the night just to make sure that she's very tired during a long flight and she'll, sleep for many hours. If your flight is in the afternoon, it's even easier. Wake up in the morning and go to the beach, go on a hike, do whatever you can, take extra time to make sure your dog is very, very tired during travel, because it's going to make it easier for them to sleep. Tip number 6, and I talked about this a little bit earlier, is do not feed your dog before a long flight. We usually skip Pika's meal before an intercontinental flight, just to make sure that she doesn't have to potty for 12-13 hours. So do your own research and, of course, do whatever is good for your dog. I'm not a veterinarian, so this is by no means any medical or veterinary advice, but we personally skip a meal before Pika flies. Tip number 7, make sure that your dog still stays hydrated. So if you skip a meal and don't give your dog a lot of water before flying, there's a risk of your dog getting dehydration if you do not feed them or give them water for 16 hours. So our great tip would be to give your dog ice cubes during a flight. usually I ask for like a little cup of ice from the flight attendant, and then throughout the flight, throughout the 12-13 hour flight, I would just give Pika a little ice cube to lick on, and that really helps and keeps them hydrated. Tip number 8 would be to take several shorter flights with longer layovers rather than one long flight. This is again our recommendation and our personal preference because it allows your dog to relieve themselves, to stretch their legs before another leg of the journey. And tip number 9, simple, obvious, but not always possible. Tip number 9 would be to travel with a friend or colleague or partner if possible. It's very challenging to travel alone with a dog because every time you need to use the restroom, you have to somehow carry your dog with you, unless you trust the fellow passenger in the plane, and if you're lucky enough, they're nice and kind to dogs. But otherwise, it's much easier to travel with someone in the plane. So yes, make sure you do that if you can. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. I hope we answered all of your questions. If you have any more questions, you can comment here, or you can reach us on Instagram on Pika Adventure. We gave you our main tips and tricks on traveling with your dog. So again, make sure you research your destination country, make sure you research your airline, and make sure you file all the proper paperwork. And find a good veterinarian who knows what they're doing. Thank you so much again for watching, and good luck on your dog-friendly travels. Say bye, Pika. Bye.